start recording, so stop talking about.
Stop being awkward.
Yeah. Say hi, everybody. Okay, guys, this morning is about how to be a business owner, which, congrats, you guys have already been business owners for a couple of months now, but we have Rex Fisher here to talk with us today. Rex, before we get into some questions, can you just talk about like who you are, where you grew up, how you got into real estate, how long you've been in real estate? Like, give us a very brief life summary of Rex.
Brief life summary. I grew up in Maine, but actually went to high school in Terre Haute, Indiana. Job transfer. That's what folks had, a job transfer. So here we are.
It's a brutal move from Maine to Terre Haute.
It's a bit of a shift, but went to Purdue, and then it kind of had grown up within Sony Music. My dad was there, and I had started my career in their North American marketing division. Discovered pretty early on that the Fortune 500 route was not mine, and was looking for a hop, and was presented an opportunity to build a company, really market analysis and price mix optimization company out of, at the time, 20 years ago, Rose Ullman's business incubator. Relocated that to Indy, and that is what got me here. Back then, we did not have, what you're seeing in downtown is just completely different. We didn't have, many tech companies starting up. The first $1 million we raised was from farmers, because there were no seed investors and venture capitalists that were doing that here. But through the exposure of working in that company, mostly in urban markets, well, all in urban markets, really just got to see how real estate was tied into city development, and saw that it was such an integral part of how a city betters itself, how it endures dips, and how it capitalizes on upswings. And saw Indianapolis as a great place of opportunity within that. Started to buy real estate about 15 years ago, and really did that as a side gig up until 5 years ago. Made the decision to get into that full time. It had kind of grown to a critical mass in the development of rentals and sales. Mark had been a friend for a number of years. Sat down with him, talked about joining the brokerage, hopped in, and here we are. Did I cover all the bases?
That covers that you live in Fountain Square.
I live in Fountain Square.
And who's your family?
My wife, Gabby, and she's from Guatemala. High school in New York, came to IU. We met here. And then we have 3 children, Everly, who's 11, Daniel, who's 9, and Eleonora, who's 6.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
You did a great job on the brief bio.
So far, so good.
Yeah. Okay, Rex, when I'm talking to new agents, or kind of like as part of our coaching at Platt, we encourage all of our agents to think about themselves as entrepreneurs who own their own business. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about why it's important for agents to think about their career as an entrepreneur, as owning their own business?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. You go through, the pre-licensing work, and they don't really touch so much on realty being a business. There's a lot of state license law. There's, a fair amount of material in there that we don't use that often. And even within some of the onboarding and training that's provided at an industry level and at individually at brokerage levels, we don't touch on, business so much, because when you're coming out of the gates, that isn't necessarily what's the burning concern on everybody's, front end. Like the burning concern is, how in the world do I generate clients and get this making money? Because I've just ground through this mind-numbing series of steps to get here, and now we gotta go. So that's pretty lead gen and business development heavy. But a business is, at its core, broken down into three, major chunks, and it can diversify from there, and you can bolt stuff on. But the primary pieces are business development, operations, finance, right? And so within realty, we kind of innately and naturally, whether we're engaging it as a business or just kind of us, performing the tasks of realty, the preset of people who tend to navigate into our space. That is where we're naturally good. That is where we celebrate our wins. That's where we get excited. It's the most people-facing. And then, we engage in the operations because it's necessary, right? Like, I know I have to get these docs in. I have to get the inspection scheduled. We need to make sure everything gets to the title company, over to the lender. We got to get the appraisal in time to close, and boom, 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 boom. But I think by and large, right, the operations side within this as a service industry is not where we say, we get, real excited and want to spend a ton of time, right? And we hardly even touch the finance end of running a business as a realtor, right? I would guess that the majority of realtors have never run a P&L or a cash flow for their business, right? And the reality is, this is an industry where if you're good in the business development end, you can make enough money that you don't have to, okay? But what ends up being precipitated within that is a reactive business cycle. It's like, everything's great, oh my gosh, I've got no clients, everything's great, oh my gosh, the world's ending. And so you see that played out, throughout the year. Like, we have this cycle where as we get to like the holidays, and it's like crickets and everybody's going, okay, like, it's good I have the holidays to distract me, because otherwise I'd be completely freaking out that it's this quiet, right? And then we start this slow ramp through January, February, and we start seeing clients come in. March, it's getting crazy. April, we're just running around like our hair's on fire. And then once we get into like back half of July, we start getting really nervous, right? We get into August and we're convinced that the U.S. economy is just swirling the drain, right? And that the real estate industry is in trouble because it is crickets. We get on the other side of Labor Day, right? It starts ramping up somewhere between Labor Day and 2 weeks after that. And typically October is one of the best months we're gonna have in a year, right? And then we start it all over again. If we're running a P&L and a cash flow, what we can do is look at, does everybody know what a P&L is? Profit and loss statement? We can look at, okay, are we actually making money? Which is great, right? It tells you if you're in the positive or negative, but it's a horrible indicator as to whether or not there's actually cash in the bank, right? So having both lenses there, I've had some businesses where the cash flow is looking good, and then I pull up the P&L and I go, I'm losing money every month on this thing. How is this happening, right? And we have to retool and fix it. But that cash flow, if I'm just looking at the P&L going, all right, we're making money, this looks good, okay. If I'm not paying attention to that cash flow, there are problems that I can identify through that cash flow that are 6 months down the road that I'm not going to see looking at the P&L until it's already a big deal, and then I'm panicked, right? So the financial end of that is the area we spend the least amount of time and probably holds the greatest amount of power in helping us focus on those things that are on the horizon that we can see coming, solve, so that we can spend today at our highest and best places and not have to react. Long answer to your question.
Yeah, no, but good. Can we break down those three parts of the business in
Absolutely.
more detail? Okay, so start with business development. Like, what do new agents need to think about?
Yep.
Like, in that category to be successful?
Sure. So You know, you ever hear someone say within this business or really any sales business, like, I just don't like sales. I hate that. I don't want to be salesy, right? They're actually saying, nobody said that? Anyway, okay. So what they're actually saying, right, is I've been sold before. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that person who every time we sit down, they're trying to get me to buy into their latest thing that I don't really want to be engaged with. Ultimately, what that comes down to is transactionalizing relationships. And that is not good business development, right? That's just something that we've seen within some businesses. In a volume game, you can make money at, but it is not the way to build sustainability and effectiveness within a relationally oriented business, right? So good business development, and especially when you're starting out, we're sitting there going, how do I generate leads? Our industry would tell you a few things, right? Any thoughts? What do you typically hear? Or if you get on YouTube or you listen to Bigger Pockets, or what do they tell you to do in order to generate leads? Any
Buy leads.
buy leads? That's, yep, you hear that a lot.
Cold call.
Knock on doors.
Cold call.
Cold call. Absolutely. The problem with that, right, is you are starting with the most distant relationships possible, right, that are the hardest to get to action because they don't know who you are, right? So I've had agents who have come in, you know, we sit down, we start talking, they're a new agent, right, and they're cold calling. They haven't even told their family they're a realtor yet, right? So, you know, when we look at that as I got to make this number of cold calls, and not that, you know, cold calling or buying leads is bad, right? But if we have not started with the most intimate, natural advocates within our lives in communicating our narrative, right, and what we're doing, then we haven't worked through the progression. We've just hopped to the easiest place to take the least amount of rejection. And I think that's why we typically end up there. It's like if you're cold calling, someone tells you no, it doesn't hurt. Like if you're sitting across the table from like your parents, right? And they're like, yeah, we're not going to use you to sell our house, right? Like that would sting. But they need to know, right? So I typically break out, you know, a network, my network, into who are my natural advocates, right? Who's like, when I, you know, told my mom, right, like, hey, I'm gonna, you know, get my realty license. She's like telling people in the grocery store in Terre Haute, Indiana, right, like that her son's a realtor in Indianapolis and he's doing great. And if they ever wanted to think about moving there, they should. You know, it's like great. Like I love it. If we have the opportunity to tell that story and to tell our narrative, you know, it isn't just like, yeah, hey, I'm becoming a realtor, right? It's what's the story. And so I think the best thing we can do out of the gate in that is tell them what we're going for. Why we become a realtor? What do we want to do? What do we hope for? What are we striving for in goals in year one? And then those natural advocates are gonna, the one question there, if we've got a healthy relationship, right, is how can I naturally help? Because those who are your natural advocates want to help you succeed in what you're doing. So it's okay to communicate to them like, hey, the only way I get to these goals is if those people who are in my camp actually think of me when they hear someone's looking to buy or sell or whatnot. And I promise that will be the best experience I can provide for you, right? And then once we've communicated in personal, relevant ways to that group, moving out to our just larger friends and family groups and doing similar, and then working out to community at large, and then let's engage with people who don't know we exist. I think starting out, being able to tell our own narrative and our own hope is huge. And then on the other side of that, what I would say is I have one metric that I've had for 15 years in business development. And it's one that somebody has to hold me accountable to every week. Because I saw the most successful salespeople in any industry do it. And that is, I have a minimum goal of 10 meetings a week across the table for people, or across the Zoom, video camera, where I am listening to their story and what they are working towards, what they're striving for, and sharing also similarly of my own. And then I'm looking for natural ways to help them. So if you just lost your job, I want to connect with you and talk about what you want to do next. And I'm going to find a way to make a couple email introductions. It's going to take me like 15 minutes. But when you're sitting at home in your house, in your living room, like, and lost your job and you don't know the next way to go, there aren't a whole lot of people who are going, let me help, right? When someone's kid is looking for an internship that they need in order to graduate college, and it's just not coming together, or a global pandemic hit and they lost that, I'm gonna go make some operations is what's going on from, you know, the inputs coming into that place, whatever they're making, and then getting it out the door, and you know, that's it. So within our arena, that is, how do we bring together the mechanics of the deal from, you know, this is how we schedule showings, this is how we get stuff listed, this is how we, you know, make sure that it's in the system correctly, this is how, you know, this is where we pull documents from, this is how we fill them out, this is, you know, who we communicate those out to, these are, I mean, literally boom, 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 from it is every process that goes into getting the deal done, right? Whatever service we're providing our clients, all right? And within operations, it's very, very important to identify two things. These are the things we do every time. These are the things we never do. And that gives us the guidepost for the gray area in between, right? But if you don't set, this is what we do every time and this is what we never do, then you're recreating and you don't have those stakes in the ground to be able to, within just a culture and a mentality, just automate things that can be automated and push that through, right? It's kind of like, you know, how do I put it? So, I mean, with my kids even, right? There are things in operations of being a parent that I do every time and stuff I'm never gonna do, right? And if I have to recreate that every time, I'm going to die. I mean, there's just too much going on, even at that age. There is a way I change the diaper every time, and there is a way I'm never going to change the diaper. I mean, and it is very black and white. So
I would love to hear some of these examples.
Let me tell you, quick tangent. I changed wiped someone else's butt for like 2009 through like 2016.
Right.
And when I was finally out of that phase, I went to have a celebratory bonfire in the backyard with the remaining diapers. Diapers, and this is good, are flame retardant. So the most anticlimactic celebration humanly possible. Yeah. So for what it's worth.
That's amazing.
But when we think about operations, that's what it comes down to. And I'll tell you this. Operations is typically the area that we just kind of don't take the initiative to systematize. And we have huge potential because if we don't systematize it, we never identify those things that we ourselves don't have to do. So we spend an inordinate amount of time filling out forms, executing tasks, and ensuring quality that takes us away from the areas where we're at our highest and best. And typically within this arena, we're at our highest and best within that business development, lead gen, client care, advocacy development.
Rex, I'm having a little bit of a hard time understanding like the things we always do and the things we never do. Can you like talk about what like things you always do and things you never do?
For sure. So things we always do within operations is from the most basic level, right? Things we always do with a buyer. We're going to make sure they're pre-approved for a loan. We're going to talk through the home buying process with them. We're going to make sure that they have the disclosures and that they understand what those are. We're going to ensure that if we're going out for a showing, that we've submitted those requests, that those requests have been approved, that we understand what the showing instructions are, right? So those things, every time we're going to do this. If we don't, what we're going to do is waste a lot of time. We're going to frustrate clients. We're going to run a very inefficient business. The things we never do right? Are the things like, you know what, we are never going to try to steer a client to an area that they don't want to be, right? We are never going to try to incentivize a client to use a service that we provide because we want to make the upshot. We are never going, let's see, on the sales side, right? We are never going to take a property live without the seller knowing their property is going live, right? And that sounds really basic, but if you don't have those things laid out, right, you have to think about them every time and things will get missed. If you have them out in a checkbox, no matter who's doing those things and ensuring that they're getting done, they're there. Oh yeah, okay, boom, 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 boom. And there's so many. It's easy for us to think about those and go like, well, of course you do all that stuff. But as your business grows, by the time you get to 5 million, 6 million, it's like, you just can't do it all. You cannot do it all well yourself, and balls start to get dropped. And so when I was at the end of my first year, started my second, I started to take this hockey stick, and it was 14-hour days, and I had a couple times where I had closings like coming up the next week, and I went, oh my gosh, I never turned in the title. Kind of a big deal. It's just, there's just too many things that can get missed when you're getting to a level of deal flow that's beyond your critical capacity.
Okay, you've already touched a little bit on finance, but break that down again.
Yeah, so finance, in general, what you're looking within finance, we're talking about resources in general, and that is primarily looked at within dollars and cents. So you want to make sure that, one, in the macro, right, you're profitable. And so being able to look in a year, and match that up to, I projected this on both sides of the, so I budgeted my income and my expenses, how am I lining up to actuals, and how's that matching up to my profitability? It's going to tell you in the rear view, again, how's the business performing? Do we need to do something different on the lead metrics moving forward? And then the cash flow is going to allow you to look out and say, how much cash do we have today? And if we hit those projections, right, where are our trouble spots? And where do we have margin to take leaps, right? The biggest help that I find immediately is within the peaks of the season. So come April, May, June, we are all going to, by and large, feel like the best about our cash position is we're going to feel all year. It's going to look really good. But if we engage in lifestyle and in business expenses without looking at how that's reflected in August, September, December, like there's some real challenges that can arise that we can totally stave off by putting that cash flow projection together, understanding our expenses, and being able to match up those budgets with actuals and then shift. So that cash flow will tell you as you're moving through it, and as you look at how your cash flow is going to be impacted by the sales you have pending. Am I spending my time in the right places? Are we okay? Do we need to make a change before it's a burning fire on your front door?
Guys, is there just a freaking helicopter hovering right over our meeting?
Yes.
What is happening right now?
Hopefully nothing.
Oh, yeah. Fingers crossed, everyone. Say your prayers.
Oh, because, well, the VP, no, I thought he was voting tomorrow. He might be coming today. John City. This is what they said at the neighborhood association meeting.
Heyo.
There you go.
Hey, you can go to the neighborhood association. Yeah, because I guess it's free.
Rex, when did you hire your first employee, and your advice for new agents, like at what point in your business, like when you're making X number of dollars, like when does it make sense to be like, I need an assistant right now?
I think, I hired an assistant at the start of my second year. She is part-time, 20 hours a week. She'd never done that type of work before. But I really hired her in as a transaction manager and to help me manage my schedule. And what I had noticed was I was ramping up to a place, kind of knew that that first full year we were, projecting north of 7 million in sales, and it was just getting really, really busy. I was doing a lot that I couldn't keep. It was like 14-hour days. So when she came up and we got her up to speed, she was able to take all of the repetitive processes that I didn't have to do, was required to do as a realtor in the equation, off of my plate. So things like making sure the documents got delivered to the lender and the title company, scheduling inspections, making sure that the appraisal got ordered on time, ensuring that our clients were getting through underwriting and that we were helping them along with any hiccups or secondary review that was taking place. Scheduling showing appointments and getting those on the calendar. Following up with post-closing touch points. Just those pieces that needed to happen, right? But were not, one, something that I had to do, and two, were not necessarily the highest and best uses of my time. Typically within the business development end, as realtors, we're either really motivated at lead gen or really motivated at client care, right? And so we're gonna naturally spend in one of those, and we're gonna probably struggle and really need to force ourselves to engage in the other. For me, lead gen is really high, and I need to bolster client care. And so this is a place where if I can offload those repetitive process-oriented tasks to a part-time assistant, I can spend the necessary time within that client care and advocacy development space. And I think at 20 hours a week, my total expense for her was like $22,000 for the year, and she opened up the capacity for me to generate an additional $100,000 in revenue. So it was pretty easy math to go, that's a good spend, right? After that, I brought in a leasing manager because we have a rental portfolio that's taken a lot of my time.
Which is great. They manage my rentals, by the way, if you're looking for someone to manage rentals.
But it was selfishly born, right? Like, we just had to have it ourselves.
Yeah.
And after that, I hired someone to come in on the listing services side and really start to pull together, the listings and kind of today what it looks like is I have an operations manager that leads my leasing manager, who's also handles all the client care with our owners, and our head of process leadership, who ensures that across transaction management to listing services to client care and advocacy development, that's all being executed within, those things we do every time and those things we never do. And then my team lead, Dan McNeil, who's the team lead for India.
Yeah. This is kind of random and maybe a little less like business focused, but like when I hear you talk about this stuff, like to me it seems stressful as poop. And I'm just curious, like, how do you think about your own mental health in that? Like, it feels like a lot of pressure, like a lot of steps to plan and think ahead. Like, how do you stay sane or stay healthy or like however you want to put it?
I think prioritizing needs is really important, right? So I have this one equation written on my whiteboard as a point of accountability, but it's an emotional capacity equation, right? And most of us have probably talked about that at some point, but it is financial capacity times time capacity times relationship capacity equals my emotional capacity to take on any challenge or opportunity, right? So if I've overstretched financially, I have no margin to think about the next thing in front of me, right? What should be, or take on another burning fire. If I've overcommitted on time, all I'm doing is running from thing to thing to thing, right? I can't look out on the horizon. I can't take on one more thing on my plate. And if I have not engaged relationship well and I've caused breaks, then I'm consumed with that, within that circle of not being right and needing to take a step towards, restoration within those relationships before I can really dedicate, margin to moving into the next thing.
Yeah.
So I think prioritizing that margin and realizing that if we, can responsibly manage that to within 80% of capacity, that other 20% in each of those buckets is going to get called somehow, but it's there. And I think so often within this space, or really any growing business, especially any starting business, you're doing everything. So it's so easy to overstretch, right? And what we end up often doing when we overstretch in that is we create more wreckage, and we're just trying to pedal faster on a bike that really needs another gear. So creating that margin gives us, or maintaining that margin gives us the perspective to look at the bike and say, we need to do something here, because we do need to maybe go faster, but it's not about pedaling harder. It's about taking the next step. And I think that's it, is the simplicity of identifying the next step and not trying to take on the whole thing at once. I mean, what my business was, what it operated like, what it looked like a year ago, it's not what it looks like today. And it was the same way a year before that, and a year before that. It's had to continue to evolve. That's hard. Like, there's times when, and the indicator to me is like, oh my gosh, why am I frustrated and anxious? I'm like, well, we've grown to the point where what we had set up isn't maintaining that margin anymore. All right, let's rework it. Until I had been through that for a few cycles, it's really hard to identify why I just wasn't enjoying the work as much as I was previously. But now we've got a pretty good cadence for going, okay, we know this is coming. We know about when it's coming. We step back, we look at where are the pinches, all right, who's getting creamed from a place of day-to-day work, and let's retool it.
Do you guys have any questions?
I have a comment. Really like your bike metaphor.
Keep that going,
My
as many
pleasure.
bike metaphors as possible for Sylvan.
Indeed. Did you cover everything? All good?
I guess the question I have is like how do you go about finding the right person?
It's a really good question.
You've definitely done a really good job. I think. Like, I wish I had Angela helping me out.
Dude, that woman gets bullets in her teeth. I think a lot of that is, so I hire people I know. And I largely do that because I am looking across the time span of experience and where are they great, okay? And if I'm not hiring because I know them, I'm hiring because somebody I know has said, hey, I know them, here's where they're great, right? Here's where they struggle. And look, we all have areas we're great, and we all have areas we struggle, right? Like, do not ask me to be your accountant. Red nightmare. So in Ashley's example, right? Ashley she is the internal leadership of the entire thing, right? And what she is phenomenal at is looking at that and saying, we can be operationally better here. We can reposition this. The team needs these things to be in order, right? And then she has a partnership with Liz, who's our head of process leadership, to come in and go, and here's the system for it, and here's how it gets done, and here's where we're gonna make it better, and here's what can never happen again, and here's what has to happen every time, and then walk that out. So I think knowing Ashley is someone who is very, very strong within people and process in general. Liz in process leadership is like a Navy SEAL of process leadership and ensuring quality execution, right? But if I was in that role, it would implode, right? And so there are times where we brought people in a role that we thought, hey, this is a good fit for them, you know. And what we learned was, you know what, that's not necessarily their area of strength, right? They just had to kind of do it in their last role, and they did. But it's not where they're coming alive. And you can do that when there's, you know, in your, you know, through a certain point, but then you grow, and that just, I mean, I can do accounting, right? Like I can do it. But when it, you know, when the volume of accounting work goes from this to this, my scale is not going to keep up. And so, you know, a lot of that is just trying to make sure that you're bringing someone in who just has those natural strengths. And then in the times, and if you're in this business and you grow it out and you hire people in, this will happen. In those times where you go, we don't have a great fit here. I think a lot of people will just continue to grind through it because they don't want to have a hard conversation or try to figure out, you know, how do we rework this? And that will create more wreckage in all directions. Part of that in business leadership is just being willing to have relationally oriented hard conversations to solve the problem before it becomes a much, much bigger problem. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
It's just the worst part about leadership.
Oh God.
So great, but the hard conversations are like,
They are. They
just
really
put me
are.
to sleep.
And yet
Tuck
you're
me in
so
bed.
good at them.
Yeah. Thank you.
Incidentally, Rosie does a great job of telling me when I am breaking something, right? And that saves Platt Collective from me. And that's needed. Like when you are in a leadership position, Ashley does the same thing. Ashley Lowe will tell me, Rex, you're breaking the machine that we are building to do this. We need to tweak, and we got to have that mirror held up. But it ain't fun.
Steph, I actually have a question for you. You've owned your own business before,
Yes, males.
right?
Yeah.
How has it felt different owning a business in a completely different sector to real
Right,
estate?
real estate.
Yeah.
So I pay myself on payroll like every 2 weeks, like an employee.
Mm.
So that was one thing that is just like tax-wise, like going to be different from my real estate business right now while I'm moving it up.
Yeah.
So I'm essentially like with the IRS, I'm filing like I'm an employee on payroll, but with the real estate business, I'll probably like take payments quarterly.
you set up as a sole proprietorship on the realty side?
What is the advice that, like, I still get confused about this. Ashley helped me set up my LLC, but like, how do you set it up? Or like, what should you go for?
Yeah, you can do it online.
Indiana takes like.
Yeah.
Right, but like, there's like a choice, right, to be like a
Sole proprietorship.
sole proprietorship
LLC,
or
S-corp.
yeah. Which one should you do?
It depends on how you're structuring your business.
Okay.
And then
Um,
it gets taxed.
Yeah. So as a sole proprietorship, you can kind of build your own realty entity.
Yeah.
But as you grow, you know, and depending on how you want that to grow, you can run into some tax snags. The LLC in general gives you the best, probably legal indemnity.
Yeah.
But if you take distributions, you're going to get double taxed. So if you are going to have money coming back your way, and you are scaling that beyond yourself, an S-corp is probably the way to go in running a payroll
Can
and
you,
then taking additional shareholder distributions.
like, say you start off as an LLC and you're not taking anything from the business,
Yep.
and eventually you want to start paying yourself. Is there a way for you to transition an LLC
Absolutely.
to an S-corp?
Yep, you can actually file for an LLC operating as an S-corp and
Okay.
port that over. That's actually what I did.
Okay.
In a
You
sense.
just like find an account.
Yep.
Is the biggest thing because like I text Eric the account. Eric tells me what paper to file,
Yep.
what paper not to file,
Yeah.
and
Voila.
but I mean like it is different for everyone, right? Like the event world is an LLC is very different world than that.
Yeah. If anyone is looking for an accountant, we have a great one that does a lot of stuff for quite a few of our agents. So he came in and did a training for us earlier this year. His name's Tom Long. He does all my taxes. He does Natalie's taxes. Does he do yours?
I was the OG.
Yeah, exactly. Jess is our connect. Anyway, they have like a great little operation if you want an intro.
I think the YouTube's worth watching. I found it helpful. He also runs my payroll. Like he can do everything, and he can file your LLC for you.
Yeah.
Like if you
Pretty
ask me
great.
how to file all the paperwork, I'd be like, I text Tom.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And he does it.
I remember when my taxes were easy and I could just go run tax.
It's great.
Those days are over.
Yeah.
Those days are over. I feel like for most people in real estate, those days are over. Yeah.
But did you really like using TurboTax? Isn't it nicer to just have a person?
I still have it
I
for
mean, it's
you know.
cheap, but it's cheap and it's easy if you're just, straight up W-2. I mean, easy peasy.
So Natalie has a great story with like switching accountants and finding an accountant that was really good. So she uses Tom now, but she was using someone else prior. And he went back like 2 years in her taxes and found like where she could have been saving money. And so when she switched accountants, she actually like made money back.
Yeah, she got back $7,000 when she
Yeah.
The
switched.
deductions that were taken.
Okay,
Like,
all of that.
yeah, I need it.
Something like that. Yeah, he's so great. If you guys want his contact information, I'll pass it along. I think that's it for today. As far as newish meeting goes, we're gonna keep meeting outside for as long as possible. So I'm gonna play it by ear next month because I don't know if it's gonna be cold or if it's gonna be lovely. So I'll keep you posted on that. Once we get into the colder weather months, I'm thinking we'll meet in just the big like open space, and we'll just like turn around some of the couches and chairs and stuff to like meet inside. I'll be sending you guys and all of our other new agents a survey at probably in the next couple of weeks as I'm starting to program for next year, just to like get your take on like, yeah, what do you guys still want to learn about? So that is all. Thanks for coming. Also, can you guys help me carry things to my car?
Sure.
Thank you.
Send me